You know when a craving hits and you can't stop thinking about it? That's what happened to me. All I wanted was a focaccia sandwich, so that's what I had to make. Obviously also needed a lunch beverage. I can't do the taste of water lately, so I use liquid IV. Love how these come sugar-free, and they have improved hydration in comparison to just water alone, which postpartum I love. After making my beverage, I move on to making a quick chimichurri. I chop up some parsley, shallot, garlic, combine that with some olive oil, red wine vinegar, some oregano, salt, some lemon, give that a good mix and set that aside while I chop up some tomatoes. I wanted to keep these really simple, so I just cut them in quarters, drizzled them with some olive oil and balsamic glaze. At this point my focaccia had risen, so I dimpled it and then decided to spread some red onions on top and some of that chimichurri before popping it in the oven to bake. Moved on to making some chicken cutlets, so I seasoned my breadcrumbs and flour before whisking up some eggs to dip my chicken in. And then I did a 3-step process: the flour first, then the egg, and then the breadcrumbs before putting my chicken on a wire rack. I repeated this step with all of my chicken and then fried it up in some olive oil and butter until it was golden brown. Once that was done, I set that aside and let it cool on a wire rack and pulled my focaccia out the oven. The sandwich needed some kind of creamy sauce, so I made Calabrian chili aioli to go alongside it. And then it was time to assemble, so I cut my bread in half, spread some aioli on top, the chicken, some arugula, the tomato, chimichurri. Obviously needed to cut that in half, and there you go. This hit the spot and was so good. This has been my favorite late night snack lately. I know it doesn't look the best, but it's vanilla pudding with a raspberry sauce. Okay, you basically just make your vanilla pudding with your eggs, milk, sugar, the usual, and then you make your raspberry sauce by boiling down some raspberries with some sugar and lemon and popping that in the fridge. I like the combination of warm and cold stuff, so my custard is a little warm still, and then my raspberry sauce is cold. There's just something about like the tartness of the raspberries with the sweetness of the vanilla pudding. This is so good. I grew up having vanilla pudding a lot, so this is so nostalgic to me. Look at that. My husband doesn't enjoy them. Banana bread is probably the thing I bake most in our house, and I had a lot of bananas this morning and we were running low, so I just decided to make it myself. They always have to have granola with their yogurt, so I made that first by adding some oats, cinnamon, maple syrup, a smidge of peanut butter, some coconut oil, some coconut flakes. I gave that a really good mix and also decided to add some peanuts in there as well. I transferred that over to my baking sheet, pressed it down, and then popped that in the oven. In the meantime, I poured some milk into my pot and heated that up on the stove. Once that barely reached a simmer, I let that cool off, pulled out my granola, sprinkled it with some cherries, cranberries, and some more coconut flakes. When my milk was lukewarm, I combined some of the leftover yogurt I have with the warm milk before pouring it back into my milk, covering that with a towel and letting it rest in a warm place for a few hours. By this time, my granola had cooled enough for me to break it up and put it away in a glass jar. Depending on the consistency you want your yogurt to be, you can let it sit for about 6 hours or overnight before popping it in the fridge for another few hours. Once I pulled my pot out of the fridge, I gave the yogurt a good mix and it was ready to serve. Put some yogurt in the bowls, topped it with the granola, added some raspberries, and obviously a drizzle of honey. I popped any leftovers in the fridge and they were so excited to have this. I make fresh butter at least once a week, so let's make some roasted garlic and parsley butter today. I start by roasting my bulb of garlic in the oven and then pour some heavy cream into my KitchenAid. I whisk it on a low to medium speed at first while I chop up my parsley. I give it a good chop and make sure that it's small enough to incorporate into the butter. Once my heavy cream reaches this stage, I turn up the speed to a medium-high speed and just let it go until the buttermilk separates. Once that happens, I turn my mixer off and my butter is pretty much done. You can use a strainer or your hands to just get all that buttermilk out. Just make sure you get as much of it out as possible. A lot of the times I ask Lucky to come help me with this since I'm not that strong. Once all the buttermilk is pressed out, I transfer my butter over to a plate, sprinkle it with some parsley, my roasted garlic, some flaky sea salt, and make sure that it's all incorporated before I transfer it over to the fridge and some wax paper to store. My husband's been on a real ice cream kick lately. We ran out of ice cream.